What up, everybody? This is Chris Orozco with Operation Moksha, and today we're talking about spiritual bypassing. And I've done something like this similar in the past, and I wanted to redo it again because there's some different angles that you can address spiritual bypassing on, and I think they're actually more important than just calling out specific behaviors, because there's some mindsets and some attitudes that come along with this where some of these spiritual bypassing things aren't really even our fault. It's just that we get presented with a lot of information and we don't necessarily know how to filter it through, the human and the ego and the psyche and all that, especially because those of us concerned with spiritual things a lot of times get taught that the ego and the shadow and all these different things are bad in like an inherent sense, and that you need to always be present and always transcend the ego and all that sort of stuff. And that can make actually embodying and integrating these lessons very difficult, because you can't really integrate fully spiritual concepts without addressing the psyche and without addressing the ego and without addressing the shadow and the persona and all these different things. Because the word psyche means soul. So it's all interrelated. And so to identify with the more spiritual stuff without having an understanding of how that integrates with the psyche and all that sort of shit, then you're gonna do these spiritual bypasses. And so I guess I'll tell you about the first type that I'm talking about. And the first type that I'm talking about is thinking that you're further ahead than you really are in as far as your spiritual development, right? With thinking things like we're already perfect the way that we are. It's like, sure, maybe underneath that is true on some kind of fundamental, spiritual level. That very well could be true. And the only reason that it's bad to think that way all the time in any kind of solid way is because, yes, you might be perfect underneath, but you have to do the work to get to the underneath. My experience of it is that there is a true self inside of me, that I have a true, real self that is authentic consciousness expressing itself through my filters uninhibited and integrated with my concern for myself and the world around me. That's my real self. It's my essence, my creative energy expressed through my psychology in a way that has integrated my polarities so that I can care about myself and the world around me equally. If I've done that, then that's, in my estimation, as close to enlightenment as I ever need to get. Now, the only way to ever actually get there and to express myself as that thing is to take full and complete responsibility for all the parts of myself that are out of alignment with that. And to do something about it, to take responsibility for it, means to acknowledge that there are parts of me that are out of alignment with this fundamental inherent nature, and it's on me to do something about it to bring them into alignment. So if you want to say things like we're already perfect the way we are, that's great if you want to use it as a reference point, but as an identity, it's factually incorrect, it's naive, and it's actually a little bit dangerous, because you take all of the stuff that you would deem incongruent with that perfect ideal and throw it into your shadow, and then it's an unconscious hazard to you and the world around you. So it's just not a good idea to do. Now there are some other things like that, just live in the moment. That's trying to be a little bit further along spiritually than you are, and it's also leaving entirely the psyche out of the situation. Where I listened to this cool lecture from Jordan Peterson last night where he was talking about being in the moment and being present and all that. And he's like, yes, be in the present moment after you've oriented yourself in the way you need to be oriented. Where are the goals that matter to you? Are you oriented towards the goals that matter to you? Are you oriented to the ways that you need to achieve those goals with your values and the things that really matter to you and your relationships and all those sorts of things? Are you properly oriented in your relationship to the world to where living in the present is going to take you where you want to go? Or are you untethered and unanchored and just kind of free-floating wherever the winds want to take you? Because it's the future will show up eventually, and there is something to do about it. And there are things to address in the present moment that may kind of take you out of the present moment. And so it's not that you're necessarily always supposed to live there. It's just that there is a lot of really good shit there. And it's just one of the ways to experience the world, that if you can get really good at doing it, your life will get better. And at the same time, you need to make sure that you're oriented in such a way that the feedback you're getting from your internal self from living in the present moment can actually be helpful and beneficial to you to take you where you want to go. So it's you plan out the future so that you can let it go and live in the present moment. And you anchor it enough to where your internal system orients itself around your goal and your vision and where you want to go so that it can guide you there. You have to have that. It's like if you've ever done archery, you look at where you want to go and your body does it for you. You don't aim with archery. You just automate the system. You say, I'm going to shoot there, and you go, okay, boom, and your body does it for you. Same type of deal. When you're shooting the arrow, you're completely present. You're not thinking, you're not planning, you're not even aiming, you're not doing any of that. And when you do that with your life, you say, here's where I want to go, and you anchor it, and then your body guides you there naturally. So just live in the present moment is actually a really great way to fuck all your plans. And you can have a lot of fun. You can experience a lot of beauty and synchronicity and connection and all that sort of stuff. But it can really come at the cost of a lot of really important things like planning for your future and resolving your past. Like, these things are important. So that's another example of, thinking you're a little bit further ahead than you are. Another example of thinking you're further ahead than you are would be gratitude. Because people, I don't see this so much anymore. This also could be because I don't hang out in hippie circles that much anymore, like deep hippie circles. I hang out with people now that are into a little bit more of the shadow stuff, so it comes up less. But I know this is a problem in some communities where people think that you're just supposed to be positive all the time, and you're just supposed to be grateful all the time, and you're really only supposed to have, half of the human experience at any given moment, and that half should be the positive half. And if you're watching this video, you probably know me and my work relatively well enough to know that the shadow is really important to me, and that's probably where I'm going with this. And at the same time, I think it's benign because it's kind of shitty to deal with someone who thinks this way and treats you as if you should always be positive. Like, I get that it's annoying and frustrating and kind of shitty. And at the same time, it's like, you got to understand that they likely have good intentions, and they're likely just trying to be positive and gain control of their life and all that sort of stuff. And this is the best way that they can do it. But with that said, it also is a spiritual bypass, because if you're angry and you think, oh, I should be grateful, it's like, well, you're fucking angry. Maybe you should be grateful, but you're fucking angry. So you got to deal with that. You got to figure out why you're angry. You got to figure out what caused it. You got to figure out if you're overreacting or if there's actually something in your external environment that's worth dealing with, and all these sorts of things. You can't just skip straight to gratitude if gratitude means covering over what you really think and feel and what you could potentially learn from those things. So again, like, we don't want to assume that we're further along in our goal, in our journey, than we are. And if we do, it's very possible that we're just not likely comfortable with where we're currently at. And I think that's the heart of just about all spiritual bypassing, is just not wanting to acknowledge where we're currently at because we think we should be somewhere else, which is kind of funny about it, because when you take into consideration this whole live in the present moment thing, what it really is it's rejecting where you currently are in the present moment and thinking you should be grateful, or you should be positive, or you're already perfect, or you adopt some spiritual lens to put over your present moment, your experiential present moment, so that you don't actually have to be with it. So it's actually kind of this ass backwards things where we adopt spiritual stuff to take us away from the actual practice of spirituality, so, which is just oddly bizarre and ironic to me. So those are some of the examples of that. Now, there are some of the other ones that are just a little bit more just straight up, I don't want to say malicious or bad or anything like that, but they kind of have really shitty negative impacts on people. And one of those is projection, right? And I see this online all the time, where people are like, oh, that's an obvious projection. Where it's like, anybody who says anything negative about you in any way that you don't like, you can just write it off as a projection. It's like people got this idea, like, started with the 4 agreements. And before that, it was like Carl Jung and alchemy and all that sort of stuff. But the 4 agreements, one of them was don't take anything personally. And people really fucking ran with that. Like, you tell a bunch of people that don't want to feel bad for stuff that nothing that anybody says is about them, it's about the other person, then wow, you just really gave everybody a really strong reason to never look at their shit. Because there's nuance to that conversation. Like, while it's true that my judgments of you are projections of my judgments of myself, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. That just because I'm judging myself in a certain way doesn't mean that I'm not also accurately reading your behavior. And vice versa. Just because you're being a dickhead to me doesn't mean you're wrong. These things are still worth looking at. And you can't just Like if somebody says something that hurts your feelings and you go, oh, they're just projecting, you're still hurt. You are still hurt. And that still requires your attention, and it still requires your curiosity, because if you're hurt, more often than not, we don't get hurt by things we don't already believe. So if somebody calls you a dickhead and you get hurt, you're like, ugh, God damn it, some part of me believes I'm a dickhead. That must mean that somewhere inside of me, I've judged myself as being a dickhead. And that's worth looking at, because that might be spilling out into my world in ways that I haven't fully owned and taken responsibility for. And it's so much better to own and take responsibility for them than it is to let them come out later and kind of just fuck your relationships into the ground. So we don't want to do that. Now, so a lot of this comes from avoiding discomfort and not wanting to give up power. That's where the projection comes from. It's somebody says something, they're clearly being a dick, and in order for us to not have to like crumble and hurt, and we're just like, oh, you're just projecting, I get to maintain my power. And that's understandable to a certain degree. And at the same time, there's much more power in saying, wow, you fucking hurt me. Like, not only, like, sure, like I had to do this recently. It's like, wow, the way, like what you said was accurate. And I'm going to take to heart what you said because you're right. And this is hitting a part of me that tells me that there's something here. And the way in which you did it is not helpful to me. And I choose not to keep people in my life that behave in that way, that talk to me in that way, that address my shortcomings and my faults in that way. Like I had to do this last week. And I could have easily said, oh, you're just projecting, and just been done with it. But the fact that I was like, you know what, this person's actually right, because this person was calling me arrogant. And I wrote, if you follow me on Facebook, you might have seen that I wrote this thing about me being arrogant. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I have been arrogant. I have been looking down on people. I have been judging people. I've been disappointed in my life. And for people claiming to be on my side, they didn't end up being on my side. And so I prematurely judge people for that. Like, you know, thanks for calling me out on that. And the way you did it was to the point where I don't really trust you or want to hang out with you anymore. It's okay to still take the feedback of somebody who's doing this. You don't have to be around them. You can set boundaries. You don't have to be close to them or have a desire to invest in them or anything like that. But to completely throw away what they're saying and just say that it's a projection actually robs you of the ability to see what they're talking about. Because after owning this arrogance, I was actually able to find the part of me that was keeping people away. I thought it was protecting me and making me seem really cool and everyone else seem shitty, but all it was doing was keeping good people at arm's length from me, and I really wanted to be connected to people. So this person pointing this out to me was tremendously helpful, and I'm really glad I was able to take the time to see what they were talking about, even if the way they went about it, hurt and seemed unproductive to me. So I think that might be everything I wanted to talk about. Yeah. So basically the heart of all this is, I think I said that twice already, but the main idea that I'm getting by here is that it's not a matter of choosing spiritual stuff or psychological stuff. It's a matter of knowing that both are required, that your psyche and your persona and your ego and your shadow and all these things have to make peace with the spiritual mindsets that you're trying to adopt. And the only way you can really integrate these things and transcend into something beyond duality or whatever 5D stuff is, I don't put much study into that, but I know it's a thing people talk about. So it's like, if you do want to transcend and integrate and go past duality and all these sort of things, you have to first work with duality. It's some like a non-dualistic perspective, or a spiritual perspective, is something that is earned through deep and intense work with the shadow and the ego and all these sorts of things. It can't be bypassed. It can't be covered up or anything like that. Like, it is absolutely required if you want to do these things. And I understand why some people do. But the biggest thing to know about this is it really all just comes from being honest, curious, and willing to be uncomfortable. If you can understand, and also knowing that you're going to love yourself no matter what you find, Because it's like, oh, I should be grateful all the time. It's like, can you love yourself if you're not? I should be positive all the time. Can you love yourself if you're not? Oh, this person hurt my feelings, and so I'm going to tell them that they're projecting. Can you love yourself enough to find the value and still hold the boundary? Can you look at what needs to be seen? Can you do something about it for your own sake? For your own sake. Can you learn to see your internal harmony and your internal integration and your internal transcendence as more important than your image? as more important than other people's opinions of you? Can you switch that around till your felt experience of integration and culmination and all these sorts of things is actually the highest priority? And you may need a little bit of help with this. It may be scary. It may be intimidating. In fact, it likely is scary and intimidating, because that's the way our minds work, is they make these things scary and intimidating so that we will stay in our comfort zone, so that we don't die. Like, this is good. But it's an old defense mechanism that we do have space and capacity to grow out of. So it's in our best interest to do that. So basically the easiest way to get out of it is just look for what hurts. And be willing to look at it and tell the truth about it. And know that your psyche and your ego and your shadow and your persona and all these things are just as important as your spiritual core. It's really easy to value one over the other because you've heard all this shit about the ego, but at the end of the day, it's all you. And it's all part of your experience, and it's all part of how you express, and it's all part of what makes you you. So embrace it all, because it's either that or, only love small parts of yourself while being really mean to the others. And I don't think that's really what any of us want to do. I think all of us want to be fully and completely loved for all that we are, and all of our capacities and all of our flaws and all of our and how long it takes us to get where we need to go, and our path and all that sort of stuff. We want to be completely loved and validated for all of it. And so when you can do that for yourself, you will no longer feel the need to do spiritual bypasses. You will no longer feel the need to present as somebody who's further along than they are, or somebody who needs to see themselves as spiritual or anything like that. You get to just be who the fuck you are, and you get to be where the fuck you are, where you are, and who you are. These are tremendously valuable things. So thanks for being here. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want any help with this. I love you, and I'll see you next time.